Well, there was a large, angry protest today, but it was not for Donald Trump. The seemingly spontaneous protest took place in Nashville, Tennessee, when students walked out of their schools in protest, marching to the state capitol to protest the Republican governor and Republican state legislature's absolute refusal to do anything to protect those students from mass murderers in their classrooms. More people showed up today and continued to show up tonight in Nashville, protesting Republican governing interference to the mass murder of children than all of the protesters who have showed up anywhere in America to protest Donald Trump being prosecuted for paying off a porn star in ways that may have violated the law. Donald Trump stopped asking for protests after no one showed up the first time he asked protesters to rise up against the Manhattan District Attorney. No one showed up. That was 2 weeks ago. Donald Trump summoned his 74 million voters from all over the country to Manhattan to protest his arrest that he said was going to happen that day. The day before Donald Trump said he was going to be arrested, the day before that expected arrest, about a dozen protesters from New York's Young Republican Club, all local kids, showed up near the courthouse to briefly say a few very polite words to the assembled news media, which far outnumbered that very small group of young Republicans who might have all arrived in the same Uber. The next day, the fateful Tuesday, when Donald Trump ordered his followers to show up and protest for him, Jordan Klepper of The Daily Show was able to find only one Trump protester at the courthouse. One Trump protester showed up when Donald Trump wanted thousands and millions to show up. Donald Trump got the message. He's not asking for any more protests because he doesn't want the embarrassment of asking for the protests and not getting them. He's just going to live with not getting the protests. The young people of Nashville are protesting from the heart, protesting to save lives. Donald Trump has given up asking protesters to save him. And today at Trump Tower in Manhattan, there were more protesters demanding that Donald Trump be prosecuted than the tiny group, all of whom could have arrived in the same minivan, who were there to protest the prosecution of Donald Trump. No powerful politician asked those kids in Nashville to walk out of their schools today. That is honest, heartfelt, life and death protesting. Those protesters in Nashville know that more kids just like them are going to be murdered in their classrooms thanks to Republican politicians from Donald Trump on down to local elected Republicans in Tennessee, whose party platform position on firearms is, in effect, to continue to make sure America's mass murderers are the best equipped mass murderers in the world. Those politicians make sure that every school shooter who wants an AR-15 can legally purchase an AR-15 and rip children's bodies apart and shatter the psyches and the emotional futures of the children who managed to survive these school shootings. We learned today that thanks to Republican governance, the mass murderer in Nashville last week, who murdered 3 adults and 3 9-year-old children, fired 152 bullets in that school, 152 shots fired. The surviving children heard each of those 152 bullets being fired, and they will probably hear that sound for the rest of their lives. They will probably never be able to get that sound out of their minds. And Donald Trump and the Republican Party that he leads have no sympathy for the suffering of those children and no plan or intention to ever do anything to in any way help those children. And that is a greater crime against humanity than anything Donald Trump will be charged with in court. But politicians doing nothing to protect children in this country from being murdered in their classrooms is not a crime in the eyes of the law. Today we saw the first fly-in of Donald Trump for an arraignment. TV news cameras tracked every movement of Donald Trump from his residence in Florida to Manhattan to turn himself in tomorrow to District Attorney Alvin Bragg. You've seen enough of that video, I'm sure. We used the helicopter shot, the famous helicopter shot of moving vehicles and the landing plane, the same kind of shot that was pioneered for O.J. Simpson's extra long ride in that white Bronco in 1994, on the day when O.J. Simpson was supposed to be turning himself into authorities to stand trial for the double murder of his former wife and her friend. If you were watching the takeoff and landing of the Trump plane today on a Delta Airlines flight on those great TVs they have on Delta, then congratulations, you were flying on a much newer plane than Donald Trump. The average age of the Delta fleet, the entire fleet, is 15 years old, which is not old at all, really, for a commercial airliner. Donald Trump's plane is more than double that. Donald Trump's plane is 32 years old. He bought it used from a real billionaire, one of the founders of Microsoft, Paul Allen. But two commercial airlines owned that plane before Paul Allen picked it up. The plane entered service in 1991 in a Danish airline and then was sold to a Mexican airline. So when Donald Trump fills up the fuel tanks of that fuel-guzzling 32-year-old plane using fuel money supplied by his campaign contributors, Donald Trump was flying around in a plane that, back when it was a pretty new plane, used to be filled with Donald Trump's favorite kind of people, Mexicans, on a Mexican airline. Real billionaires, of course, have planes that are younger than their grandchildren. But Donald Trump's elderly plane landed safely on a perfect flying weather day. You should get used to this coverage because there will probably be another Trump fly-in to an arraignment in Atlanta, Georgia next month, when Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis may be ready to go forward with indictments of Donald Trump and Trump associates in a conspiracy to overturn the presidential election in Georgia. And according to the latest revelations of Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's investigation of Donald Trump's possible illegal possession of government documents, the next fly-in for an arraignment of Donald Trump after Georgia could happen in Washington, D.C. on the documents case. We will discuss the latest developments in the evidence in that case later in this program, including possible evidence that is more incriminating of Donald Trump on obstruction of justice than anything else we have learned so far in this investigation. And after the documents case, remember, the next Trump fly-in for an arraignment could also be in Washington, D.C., where another Jack Smith-supervised grand jury is investigating possible crimes committed by Donald Trump leading up to and on January 6th. Tomorrow will be the first opportunity for the judge in Donald Trump's case to consider a gag order on Donald Trump's comments about the case, as if to try to taunt the judge into issuing such a gag order today, just today and tonight in his social media postings. Donald Trump attacked the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. He also attacked specifically, repeatedly, Alvin Bragg's wife. And Donald Trump attacked the judge in the case. Donald Trump has already indicated that his lawyer's first motions in the case might be to remove the judge and to seek a change of venue in the case.